Alrighty then, welcome Envisioneers. We're going to look at Unity instead of Roblox Studio today. And here we notice that we've got to use a very specific version of Unity if we're going to be able to play together in spatial.io. So I have the Spatial SDK right here, and the way that I got that was that I went to toolkit.spatial.io, and there's on the toolkit.spatial.io, there's a lot of information about how to build with Unity. So C# and Unity, and then you get the version that is required of Unity, not the latest version. And then you get the starter template. And once you've opened the starter template, this is what you get, and it should have a Spatial SDK menu up here. And that is what is needed to test. And if you wanted to test, you could come up here to assets and create an asset, and we could do, for example, there's a couple of different things. Maybe what we want to do is just put in a simple cube, and I think the best way to do that is to go to Game Object, and they have spatial things in here. But if you wanted to put a 3D object, if you wanted to put your own sphere, let's say, let's not do a cube, but let's do a sphere which appears in the center of the world, then you could make that appear in your game. Another thing you could obviously do is you could go to Game Object and you could create a plane, which would be the world that you're sitting on, and see if that works. But there's these other spatial components themselves, and you could add them from spatial. For example, an entrance point to your game so that you know where you're entering, and that does not necessarily have to be in the center of the world. You can also create a seat hotspot, avatar teleporter, climbable projector surface, interactable, point of interest, and even a quest. So there's a lot of stuff that you can bring in. Let's just take a look, though, at this as it is right now. We'll go to Test Package, and is that what we want to do? We haven't saved this yet, of course, so let me save this. You don't have to watch it being saved. So when we hit Test, it's going to try to connect you with your spatial account. And so I believe I would use this one. And then it's going to load your sandbox. Waiting for that. And then you end up in your sandbox. And it looks like I have a gun for some reason. I'm not even sure why I have a gun. And I don't see the world that I built. So that's interesting. Let's go back to here and test the package again. And see what that does. Close this sandbox. And still, we just have this weird gun. Alright, that's not supposed to be the way it happens. So we need to look here and see how we are linked. If we go to the Spatial SDK configuration, space gun. Huh. Well, I'll be. So we probably want to create a new world and make this new world have a new idea here. So space, we're going to create a new space. We're going to say create a new space. And then we're going to give the space a name, and we'll call it Suzerain, because that's what we're going to be putting in here. Suzerain in Morocco. The scene would be Suzerain Spatial, which is what we are working with now. Thumbnail, we don't have a thumbnail yet. And the C# assembly we don't have, but we're going to, now that we have this, we have a new space. Okay, so we want to create a second space. Spatial island, space Suzerain. I'll go back to that. Let's try to test the scene now and see if that package has errors. Why? All right, it doesn't have a thumbnail, and it doesn't like that. So we need to make a thumbnail. Every scene needs a thumbnail camera to generate a thumbnail. Use a camera angle that best represents the space. Fortunately, there is an algorithm that tries to help you get through the process and give you error warnings and tips on how to solve them. It is a bit of a pain in the beginning, as the setup of a lot of programs, and this one is taking its sweet time. All right, so let's then get this thumbnail camera in here. So spatial and thumbnail camera. Now we have a thumbnail camera, and what is the thumbnail camera looking at? Thumbnail camera is looking at not what we want so far, so let me rotate this world by getting to the rotate tool, and let's see if we turn around. There's our sphere, and we can lift this world up. All right. That's what the thumbnail camera does. And so now it says it has no thumbnail assigned. So we do have a thumbnail camera, and it says that the entry point is not above solid ground. So where's that entrance point we made? We need to bring that up and see if that changed anything. Yes, it did. There's still no thumbnail camera associated or assigned. And then there's the Unity engine auto listener that's, you can do an auto fix. So there's the auto fix. And we still don't have the thumbnail assigned. So to assign a thumbnail, how are we going to do that? We're going to, let's see, still get the same error. So let's find out. And it doesn't have a thumbnail yet, but it may work this time. Let's just hope. There we go. Okay, so that's what we got. We got this place that we made. And then whatever these mirrors are seems to be from the actual, you can interact with these things, eh? All right, well, that's part of spatial. There's a mirror there. If I walk, I'm going to fall into the world. And yeah, goodbye. All right, and then we end up there again. It looks like there's some stuff from a previous build that I did. What is that? This says, why can't I turn around? And then there's these mirrors. So it's all very interactive there. That's my mirror, me moving around. Old futuristic spaceship. So, okay, well, it's got some stuff in it, and I'm not completely sure why. There's a cat in there. Yeah, there's a cat. All right, but be that as it may. Oh, and there's a keyboard. There's a lot of stuff in here that I didn't know even needed to exist. And there's an incinerator. So this is obviously coming off of some previous work that I was doing in here, and it's still in the game. But at least my ball is in here, and I guess if I want to move these things out, then I can trash them. Deleted. It's gone, at least from this world. So I'll just remove. I kind of like the incinerator, so I'm going to keep the incinerator in there. And I'll get rid of this mirror. This mirror I'll keep in there for whatever reason. Anyway, that is our world in simpler, but it does work, and other people could join it. So we'll close that, and we'll come back to our world here. And then our package has no thumbnail. Assign a thumbnail of size 1024 to 512 to fix this issue for publishing. All right, so if we wanted to do that, if you get this error, then let's find an image, and the image would be the village of Am-Suzart. So if we go to maps.google, because we're using this for GIS, and we type in Am-Suzart, then we could take this image from here, we could turn it a little bit in 3D. That's one way to get our image. Another way would be to go back into our cesium, and in our cesium ion, we can get a more interesting image. So I have here, I have Am-Suzart there, and then I can get more interesting view of the village and the mosque. So that's much more interesting. Then let me grab this and take this image, which has the Latlon in it, and let's see now if I can save it as a 1024. So I call this Am-Suzart, and it needs to be, once again, 1024 by 512. So 1024 x 512, and it's not going to be that yet. I'm going to have to make it that. So let's also put it in a place where we can use it more effectively in the indigenous folder, and Am-Suzart right there. All right, so that puts that image in here. Now to make it 1024 to 512, naturally we would have to open it in with GIMP would be great, but GIMP takes a long time to load. Let's just see what happens with photos, and let's see if we edit it to resize, save options. Yeah, this is not really, this program isn't going to do much for us. Let's try the other program. Let's try, what was that? That's photos. Let's try Paint. And then we will go and say that we want to resize it. So to resize it, we go like this, and we say we want it not to be in percentage but pixels, and we want it to be, as the name that we called it says, we want it to be 1024 by, break this and say 512, and that is our image. And so save it over itself. Hopefully this will work. So it has no thumbnail. So configuration thumbnail here, we need to add to it is Am-Suzart, and it's not going to show up here because it's not an asset. So you have to go into the folder where you saved it and drag that in as an asset. Now that we have an asset in there, we go and select it, and there it is. And now we will not get that issue because we do have a thumbnail. That's for when we publish it so that people can play the game. We're not there yet. So let's close this. Let's make sure we save there. So that's what you have to do to be in the spatial world. Now, we have already gone into Blender, but we might as well do it again for you and show how we would get Amsuzerd into here. So wait for Blender to load. And okay, so we're in Blender, and what we're doing is we're coming into GIS because we have this plugin, this add-on added, GIS. And we're going to Web Geodata, and we're going to Base Map, Google Satellite, saying OK. Hitting G for go to. We'll say Amsuzerd, like that. Our zoom level we'll do at 18. We'll say OK. And it should be loading. Well, it's not. Oh, buddy. Let's try it again. Let's go to 18. Let's say Amsuzerd. There we go. Boom. All right, and then we'll find the area that we were looking at. It has the mosque there. Great. So there's our area, and we can be a little bit tighter like that. We've got the bridge we want to go, maybe a little bit looser. There, maybe that. So maybe 18 was right. And then we're going to go to E for extent, and we've got the extent. Now go for the elevation data from Open Topography, 30 meter, not the 90 meter. And you've got your API key that you have to have. And this is the same procedure that we did for Roblox Studio. You could use, in fact, the same landscape, going through the process again to show it. So now it has that distortion in it, DEM, the digital elevation map. So now go down to the tool modifiers and apply the digital elevation map, 2 of them. And then take this, open this up, and let's bring it down to the ground here. So hit the 1 key, hit G to select it, and bring it all the way down so that it touches. You can always use the period key to find it again. Zoom in and just bring it down so that it bottoms out. And then when you have that, hit Control A and apply the transforms. And then it will be centered at 0, 0. That is what we want our landscape to be. If we now want to export it, then it'd be very useful to go out first and make sure we get the image that's going to go on, the texture image. So go to UV editing first and scroll out and select by hitting A to select all the mesh, and then you'll see the mesh there. And then go to image and save your image as. And don't use a TIFF, that is way too big. Use a JPEG, should be fine. Or use a PNG. You can use a PNG, it takes up a little more memory. Give it a name that you're comfortable with, like I would say Amsuzerd Village Zoom 18, so we know that that's how big it was. Bring it into a folder where you can find it again. And there, Amsuzerd. And you can say Zoom 18 texture. Now you have that texture associated with it. and having that texture associated, you could also give it the name, or you can open that up. So there's desert texture. Didn't come in for some reason. Desert village texture, open image. Well, that is interesting. Doesn't matter. What we're going to do now is go to the layout. Having this selected, we're going to go to File and Export and FBX. We're going to pick a folder. Wait a second, the machine is running slow because I have Unity and Blender running. And then I will give this, make sure that I'm in path is got to be copy. And this here, the embed textures, needs to be on. And we're going to limit it to the selected object, so it's just the mesh. And I'm going to bring it down to 0.01. And then I'm going to give it a name and say Suzart Village Mesh 18 and export that. Now when I come into Unity, I will go and bring that in, importing a new asset, finding the folder in Indigenous Land Projects, and then I do have Suzart Village Zoom texture. I'm going to bring in, that's what I just made now, is a PNG file. That's going to come in as an asset. And I could, of course, throw that right onto here if I wanted. But why? Because that's not the landscape. But I want you to see that you could do that. You can throw images on like that. We're going to bring in a landscape. So we're going to import a new asset. And we're going to use the Suzart FBX that we just made, which was made here, Village Mesh. Import that, and we'll bring that in, dropping it onto here, and it's already textured and ready to go. Cool. All right. So maybe we move it down just a tad. No. So this would be like water if that was sea level, although we're way in the mountains, we're way above sea level. But just to show you, if we wanted to scale this up and scale it out, right, that could be like the ocean, and we could move it, and then we could even color it. So the material here, the base map, or is it not going to list? We don't actually have a material for it yet. We'd have to create a material. So create a material and call this water, and this we can change the look of. So let's go some dark. Then we could drop that onto there. And then if we wanted to talk about sea level rise, and you know, you're better off living up in the mountains. Okay, so that is just a fun thing that we can do there. And the real thing is now is to see if our character, oh, sphere out of here. We don't need the sphere at all. So boom, to see how our character looks on this landscape. So let's go ahead and test. And it's going to launch the website, we think. It's good that we have scene vitals here to tell us if our mesh is too big or too small. But we made it 100 times smaller than the landscape was, so I'll bet we're going to be giants on the landscape. Let's see. Yeah, we are. We're massive, right? So Gulliver here, walking around trying to pedal incinerators. And seeing his own mirror. Let's move this mirror out of here, out into the ocean. All right, so clearly this isn't the right size. One way that we determine if we're in the right size is by bringing in a car. So I'm going to close this down, and I'm going to go back to our Unity file, and I'm going to bring in a car and try to see if I can match it up with one of these little cars down here. So to do that, I'm going to go to my package manager where I had downloaded cars before, and if you have not done it before, you're going to have to go to the asset store, and it'll tell you that you need to download it, and it tells you where to open Window Package Manager and then open the Package Manager button. You can search online. So I do have some cars already under my assets. So when I search for car, there's a bunch of low poly cars, but these ones may be unsupported. No, not too bad actually. Low poly painter cars, low poly cars. This one is no longer available. Garbage truck could be very interesting. And that could work. And then there's a sedan car. And I've used the sedan car a bunch of times, so I don't need to download it, so I can just import it into the scene. And it comes in with all these different materials and different parts, and it even comes with date palms and desert rocks, and as you can see here, a whole scene that we might want to make use of, which, since we're going to be doing Morocco, might be cool for setting our scene. So it's nice to have this package. You never know what you're going to find online, and when you're working for free, you accept what you can get. If you want to pay for stuff, you can build any world you please, but this is the free stuff. And let it reload the assemblies. These things can take a hellishly long time to do, so when you're working on this, this is a great time to do your homework. I usually let these things start to decompress and recompress, and I just go in and start grading. Some of the great work that our students have done until it freezes the computer, as it seems to be doing here. Okay. You can keep looking down at the bottom of the screen to see what the progress is. Some packages take a long time. Very interesting. So I'm going to put you on pause, and I'm going to keep reading my students' work. Come back to you. All right, and we're done. So let's go look at the assets folder, and we find Final Form Studio, and it has a folder called Cars. It has another folder called Cliff Scene, which has some props that we can bring in, these things called prefabs. They're lacking, unfortunately, they're lacking textures. And sometimes you can fix that by, in these older packages, by going and selecting them all and then telling it to go to Edit and go to Rendering and then Materials and generating a shader. Sometimes this works out, sometimes it doesn't. And in this case, it did not. So when that happens, then You know, what can you do? You look at some of this stuff and you try to find different ways to make it work. Sometimes that's only in the materials folder, and you find these materials that have been deprecated, water, palm trees, and then you try to get those to work by kind of rendering in materials and then convert to a universal pipeline and hope for the best. And it doesn't always work. Sometimes you can go and try to do a standard shader. Sometimes you can go to universal render pipeline and then do simple lit, for example. And yeah, they're not perfect in the stretch of imagination, but at least they're there. And then when you go to props, hope that your prefabs have the ability to use those textures. And they kind of look like they have them, but you know, this is a hit or miss thing when you're using older. Yeah. So yeah, not working well. Anyway, that'll be also true of the car. So the car is going to be a little messed up. It's just sort of gray right now. There's the prefab there. Again, what to do. Prefab is missing scripts. It's properties. So you can have these issues that can baffle you when you're using this. But if I just bring in the sedan car, you can see that it's just huge, just like my character was. So rather than shrink the car to fit the landscape, because then the character from Spatial is going to be weird, I'm going to click on the landscape and I'm going to go to scale, make it a locked scale, and I'm going to bring it up 100 times, because then my scale is going to work. And plane, where'd my car go? My car is here somewhere. There we go. Now the scale is actually right. Now the image isn't very high textured, and maybe we do need to go back to that TIFF at some point, although that uses a lot of memory. But the car at least is copacetic with the landscape. And we'll rotate it around like that. And you probably ask, well, why didn't we just bring it in at its original size? It's safer to bring it in at 100th of its size and then scale it up, because at least you'll know you can get it in and start playing with it. All right, so the car is there, and it's probably going to fall through the world because it doesn't have a collision component. So I'm going to have to put a component on this car and give it a let's give it a simple box collider for now. And this landscape, I think that Spatial might give it a landscape collider. We'll see. So let's just try this and see what we get. And it says you can't upload your package. The entrance point is not above the solid ground again. So we've really got to move it. And that's because this thing is so big. And where did we have it? So let's move this out of the way. The position here should be set at 0. And then our entrance point needs to be above. I'm going to hit F to focus in. Put our entrance point low enough on the ground now that we come in, that we should come in near the car. So if we're going to do that, let's move our, oops, do that. Let's move our entrance point right down to about where the car is. and then bring it down to the ground. Sorry, plane, if you remember that. Okay. And we'll see if we're going to fall through the ground or not. So let's try it now. Refresh. Still not. Okay. All right. Try it higher. Still not. All right. I'll move it higher. And it's saying it because there's no solid ground. All right. So this has got to be turned into solid ground. And that would mean that we would have to add a component, and we'd need to give it a mesh collider. And see if that works. Does it detect this now as solid ground? Yes, it does. All right, so that's because we had to add this mesh collider that makes it solid, otherwise it's just a ghost. And that's why the box collider of this car will no longer fall through, because the box will collide with the mesh and everything should work. So we're going to try to test this now. And it's loading our sandbox, telling us to hang tight. And boom, we are on the landscape. And there's the car. So everything is now the right size. And we have this ability then to move about. Now, if you want to see it from a bird's eye view, you can stay in Spatial, and you can, not in the sandbox. I guess we can't add anything in the sandbox. Or can we add content? Yeah, you can. You can add furniture and add an airplane seat. Failed to load. Why did you fail to load? That's a shame. Try it again. Failed to load. Okay, so maybe it doesn't work in the sandbox. Let's see, I'll just try another chair and see if that loads. That one seems to be loading. Yep, it does. And then you hit S for F, and then you can grab your chair and you can start to move it. Oh, we're going to move him up in the air and say, I'm floating over the city. Oh. Right. And fly over and above in sort of a magical mystery tour. So yeah, so he can tour the landscape until he falls and falls and falls, and then boom. And then he's got to make his way down the hill. So now we know we can start modeling. We can start modeling our landscape, putting in trees and such. And that would then imply that we'd want to use this kind of view and try to get as close to what this place really looks like as possible in Unity. And I didn't mean to move that around. So I need to anchor this. And to do that, I would, is there a way to lock it? To lock the position, copy, revert. So give me a moment. I'm going to see how I can lock this, because in Roblox, remember we had the little lock that you applied to it. It's not obvious here how you lock the mesh. One moment. All right, so now we're going to get into our first script, because Roblox has the lock mesh function and Unity does not. And so ChatGPT, being our great ally, tells us the best thing to do is to put a custom script in, and it wrote the script for us. So I'll hit copy, and it says to then go to the, let's see what it said about that. The project window, assets, create C# script. Okay, so here's assets, and I'm going to create a C# script, and I'm going to call it lock mesh position. and then I will open that script. It's probably going to open Visual Studio. Yes, it does, because that came with this. And I will take the script that ChatGPT created, and this is part of what we've been doing with Roblox Studio Lua as well. Some of us are not coders, many of us are not, but we have a coding ally as the so-called AI, which I call ally, is available to us. We might as well use it and get the kind of GIS functionality that we want. So I'm going to come up here and replace all of this, and that is the script. And then I'm going to save it. And now when I'm in Unity, it'll compile the script. And I'm supposed to attach it to the object. So that's the mesh, and it is that it got rotated for some reason. We want it to be, oh, that was gone. No, that was wrong. Okay, rotation. I'm not sure why. I guess it's negative 90 is what it should be. Okay, just to make it even. And this needs a script, so I'm just going to drag this script. Couldn't add it because the script class can't be found. Oh, why is that? So what if I go script? Script machine, new script. All right. So if I call this lock mesh and create and add it, and I can get rid of this one. Oops. This is the one that I had from Visual Studio. And let's go and put that into this one. Maybe I need to, wait, start, where does all this go? So using Unity Engine was already there. And maybe that's it right there. Lock mesh position. This is lock mesh. Just call this lock mesh. We'll come back to Unity. This one here, which was lock mesh position, we can get rid of. And let's hope that this works. It seemed to have a problem. So, associated script cannot be added. Please fix any compile errors and add a valid script. So why is that? So I'm going to have to ask ChatGPT. All right, after some troubleshooting, it turned out that the class name wasn't matching the file name. It had to be public class lock mesh, the lock mesh monster, and then everything else had to be just had to be checked out by chat, because I uploaded these problems and it kept giving me said to check the error console. And so I opened the console by going to Window, Panels, HUD console open, and then there were some errors that I looked at that were in red, and then I told chat about it. And then it told me what to do. It reprinted the script. So now I have a script that I can share with all of you for locking the mesh. And the idea now is that there should be a lock mesh that has checkboxes. That's what our script here created. It created lock options that you can lock the position, the rotation, or the scale. And you can uncheck this. And if you wanted to change the scale, then you could, or you could unlock the rotation or the position. So you could bring it up if you wanted to, but and not be able to rotate it. Or you can lock that and uncheck the rotation, and then you wouldn't be able to lift it, but you would be able to rotate it, as you can see. So that's what this lock mesh script is. And it's really cool to start developing your own scripts to make things safe for yourself. Now that we have this, we can test it again. Is there a reason to test it again? We haven't brought anything in yet. We were going to bring in some trees, but the reason I locked it is so that while I'm doing all this, I don't accidentally select it and move it, because that would be kind of tragic. So let's bring in, for the first thing, there is a mosque here that we can begin to work with. Here we could bring in a game object and create a 3D object and make a cube, and then we can scale that cube up. And we can move it and rotate it, just so we can start getting buildings in the landscape. Okay. Maybe scale it up a bit here. So there's some limited, this is not Blender, it's not a mesh modeler, but it does have some simple objects that you can drop in just for starters. And of course with this too, we can add a material. And if I want to make a material for this, again, I have to create a new material. And then I might call this Adobe Brick. And then pick a color for it. And some more pinkish color. I can use the color mapper and actually grab the color that's on the screen, and then I'll actually have it. So then drag that material onto that, and we have the beginnings of a part of the landscape like that. The spatial has a road under game object spatial. Somewhere in here they have, I thought they had roads. Game object, no, maybe not. I thought they did. Okay. Point of interest could be put in. That's interesting. There's a point of interest. We'll put the point of interest over here at the mosque. And while I would end up modeling this in Blender for real, what if in 3D work, you always have to think. Next is thinking. But there is a minaret on the top of this, and you could add another game object, like another cube, and then bring that cube after we've appropriately sized it. We could bring that cube over here. Really not a good modeling tool using Unity for this, because you have to keep shifting perspectives, unlike Blender, which is made for this. But there's that cube again. And let's focus in on it, and we'll rotate it. Try to go straight on top. Let's bring that down. Forward. Scale it down. Forward. And you see these arrows are pointing in weird directions. You can go in and you can change whether it is local view or it is global view. And to do that, you can go to local, and then it switches to the cube being local, and that's a lot easier to use. That's over here somewhere. Local or global. So local is just the object itself. Makes it a whole lot easier to manipulate. And then if we stretch this up like that, just the beginning of that, and this can use the same as that. So you can see how you could begin to map those things. You can also bring in, of course, realistic trees, just like in Roblox. So once again, if we go to the package manager, I've already brought trees in that I downloaded. So I have low poly simple nature pack. It's not going to look like mobile tree package. That one there. It's an M tree creation, a little harder to use. Nature starter kit. Realistic tree pack. This one I've always found to be pretty good, and it's already downloaded on my computer, so I just have to import it. And once you have your trees, then you can bring them in. These are the free assets, of course. All right, they should be in. We'll find them under Realistic Tree Pack and under Prefabs. Once again, we have the same issue with the materials. So we would want to go up here and see if we can convert them. It's not working. If we do this one alone, rendering convert, upgrade these. Yep, we can do the same thing here and here. Legacy issues, always legacy issues. Now if we go to the models, I guess we're going to have to do the same thing for the models. And it won't let us. So it frustrates me when this happens. Let's see if this tree, yeah, it came in, I guess. Yeah, it came in. It just looks pink there. So you can start putting trees in the landscape. And a lot of this work we're going to end up doing in Blender anyway. But that gives us a start, and then if we play the game, you will see that all these new assets should appear in the game. So go and test the scene. And there's an error. Lock mesh. To affect this offending component from the object. Deleted the component. Okay, so when you're running it, you're not allowed to have these scripts because they interfere. Oops. But lock mesh is still here as a script. It's just that you would use it. And maybe what I need to do, let me undo what I did there. Keep the lock mesh monster in there, right? So I'll put this back over there. So that's what is locked when I'm working on it, and then I would just turn the script off when I do the compiling. And that should stop with the offending message. Let's see. No. Deletes the component from the offending object. All right, so even though it's off, it doesn't like it. So I would have to delete it from there. I can still keep it. I just remove it, and then I'd bring it back in whenever I want it. It's in my assets folder, but it's not attached to the object. So that should fix the problem, as it does. So those are good things to know, that Spatial does not want non-spatial scripts attached to objects. It just will not allow for that. So keep your assets and remember how you put them on and how you take them off. When you're working, the lock mesh script is very useful. And so here we go. All right, so we're in the landscape, and there's our mosque up the hill. Our car is still over there. It doesn't drive. I don't think it does. Sometimes these things, no, it doesn't have a driving function. But we can run up the hill and see the mosque and the trees. And we probably should have put our spawn point near the mosque and the trees so that we could get to them more easily. But here we go. We are up there, and we finally made it to the little mosque. And we're looking down the valley. Yay, hooray, we did it. And we'll be able to populate the entire landscape with different models to get our village. We know that down here is where the trash is. This is where it flows down. So we want to be able to identify where these problems are. Unfortunately, that's going to end up using scripts, and that's going to create probably problems, but we should have ways of turning what the scripts make for us into objects that then can be brought into spatial. So let's go back to ChatGPT and ask for the first script. I think I have it way up at the top of this. Okay, it wouldn't be there. Spatial resolution, Unity GIS mixed reality. That's when we were using. Okay, so it's going to be a new query, and it's going to be, okay, I'm ready for that script to do geolocating in Unity for spatial, being able to identify and name locations of interest. And let's see what we get. And there's a C# script. It's going to give us these clicks for object placement or preset GPS coordinates, custom naming, step by step. Create an empty game object called geolocation manager. All right, so we go here and we create empty, and we call it geolocation manager, just as it said. It's an empty object, which means it doesn't have any form. That's what we have. Geo there. All right. Oh, and by the way, this cube is the mosque. So mosque body, and this is the mosque minaret. And we probably want to bring the minaret inside the body, so it's a child of it, and that means that if we grab the body and move it, it moves with it. And if we grab the minaret alone, we can always position the minaret. So that is a good little fix. Now, what does it want us to do? The geolocation manager is an empty, and then chat is suggesting that we create a prefab with a 3D icon, sphere, pin, etc., text mesh pro or text mesh label. And so the script it gives us is in that object. All right, so we're going to create a script, copy this. Here we're going to create a C# script, and we will call it, have a name for it here, geolocation manager. This is called geolocation manager, and we open this up and we copy our geolocation manager script, paste it into here, and save it. And then what do we do, chat? So what is the script doing? It is getting names, latitudes, longitudes, camera, main camera, points of interest, array, and then 3D pin prefab, your main camera. All right, so it was wanting us to create a 3D icon and ensure Texture Mesh Pro is installed. All right, so there's another package, Texture Mesh Pro. Let's install that as it said. So we would go to our package manager, and then we would look at Unity registry and say Text Mesh Pro, there it is. Do I have it? We need to update it. So I did have it. It's Ultimate Text Solution. And I'm just updating it to the latest version, which you always seem to have to do. All right, so we know we have it. It's in the Unity registry. It's currently installed, and so we should be all right there. It's telling us then create a prefab, POI prefab with a 3D icon. All right, so create a prefab. So if I come here and I say game object create, is there a way to create a prefab here? Toolkits. If we go to assets, create, where's a prefab? Create a prefab, where's a prefab? Let's see, create a prefab. There it is, prefab. Okay, so it's under assets, create, and then prefab, and it says we should call this prefab POI, point of interest prefab. All right, did that, and then what are we adding to it? Prefab with. So if you double click on that, then you can add into that a game object, which would be a cube or a sphere or a capsule. I like a capsule. And I'd like that capsule to be red. So I would go to my materials, create a new material, and call it red, because that's what it's going to be. And turn it red. Maybe turn on the metallic map. Bring it up to make it metallic red. Ooh, that's cool. All right, and then drag that onto there, and then close the prefab. Now, how do I add that prefab into my POI prefab? Is that color. So that's okay. So we've created a prefab, but what are we doing with the prefab? 3D icon, a sphere pin, etc., and then a label. Well, I mean, I don't know how you add a label to it. I guess you could create a 3D object text. There we go, okay. Like that, eh? So sample text is a little big, wouldn't you say? Okay, it's too big. How do you shrink it? You scale it? Yeah, and then move it. All right, and we would call it, does it say what it wanted us to call it? Text mesh label. So a label. What label? And where is the text setting? What are you text setting? Materials, probes, scale. Text mesh pro is here. Okay, sample text changes to point of interest, for example, and then make it like that. All right, so that is our point of interest marker as a prefab, and that is what would come in if we drop that in. It becomes a point of interest. Right? And if I bring it right into here and I go like that, it says point of interest. Pay for that. All right, what's next? Save that. Next it says we have the script example use. Add the script to geolocate manager game object. All right, so geolocator goes into the geolocate manager. All right, and says it's got the script. POI prefab is this one. Boom. Main camera, but we wouldn't have because we're using spatial. Let's figure that one out. And then a list of POIs in the inspector, like Eiffel Tower. Yeah, I would like that. So if we're going to do that, then the script apparently gives us origin, latitude, and point of interest, and that list is empty. The origin, latitude, so this will be interesting to see. If I add a list to this, name, I would go back to the map here, not that map, this one here, and if we wanted to put in the Riyadh, then we would grab that and we would go here to Unity and we'd put in the latitude and then we'd put in the longitude, get rid of any commas that are there, there shouldn't be any commas, and then the name is going to be this Riyadh Dar Am Suzert. So we come in here, change this to Riyadh Dar Am Suzert, sorry, which is cool. So that is in there. Now I don't know what happens when we play the game because it's supposed to be tested in Spatial. It doesn't support Spaces Editor, but that becomes a character. I don't have a character, so that becomes the character. Nice. Limited editor simulation. And way up on the hill, you know what? I'm going to stop this because my point of interest should be then up at the mosque. So my entrance point, which was there, let's move the entrance point right up to right up to here. And make sure that we come in above ground, even if we have to fall. Yeah. Okay. So now we should come in right there. Got it. And then we're right next to the mosque. That's our character. There's our point, but we haven't added any other point. So if we look for points of interest, location marker, well, that was the one that we brought in from, I mean, that's the one that we brought in from Spatial. But Spatial, Riyadh Dar Am Suzert, due to floating point precision, it's recommended to bring the world coordinates of the game object within a similar range. It's got nothing to do with it, right? So we'd have to then bring the center of the world to this, it seems like, because that ain't part of the world here. And that means that the origin here, its own latlon, would have to be placed at those incredible values, and that's what I'm uncertain of. It says that the transform is there. Okay. But 31 and -7 is not that, and 0, 0. Guess that's 0, 0. But where is this? So this is a question for chat, and I'm going to ask it and get right back to you. Okay, chat's doing some fixes for us, which are pretty spectacular. So I need to create a new script. And this new script, it suggests be called billboard label, which keeps the billboards where we want them facing the camera. And put that in there. So there's that, and then save that. It had me update the geolocation manager, and it told me that the original latitude and longitude needs to be assigned. So I'm going to go to what I think is the center of my map, and I'll define the center as where the bridge crosses the water. So let's see if this works at all. Well, I really don't know where the center is, to tell you the truth. Hold on, let me ask chat, how do I determine the center? Okay, this is cool. So what I'm going to do, it's created a script for me called mesh center marker. So I'm going to go to, I'm going to take this script and create a new script called mesh center marker. And let's call this mesh center marker. Come up here, and the code is this one here to find it. And then I'm going to paste that code in here and save it. And then I'm going to attach this script by dragging it onto the village mesh. And then hit play or enable the script in edit mode. That'll be cool. So let's go in here and drag the mesh center once it compiles. Hold on, okay. So the Amsuzart village mesh, I'm going to take mesh center script and drag it on. And wait a minute, did that get put in the right place? Mesh center marker. So where is it? It created a marker. I guess that's it. That's the marker. Isn't that interesting? Because I'm looking at Amsuzart Village, and it's got this mesh collider. Does it have a script? Where is its script? It doesn't have the script. So mesh center, it didn't work somehow. So let's put this on there. There it is. Turn it on. Oh, and it made another mesh center marker. So there's two mesh center markers. It just like spontaneously makes it. But that's the mesh center. And so then if we bring this down, ooh, that didn't work, did it? How could that be the mesh center? It's saying that's the mesh center, but if we bring the y value down to 0, okay, that's it. All right, so let's then look at where that mesh center ends up. Ooh, we didn't even do that. Should be 0 then. Bring it up a little bit. Come up here. But that's where it's going to end up. And there we go. So that's our mesh center marker. Where are you on the landscape? You are this building. Seems like that's the exact building, ironically, that Abdurrahim stays in. So that is kind of ironic that he was in the center of this world. All right, then we know what to do to get the latlon from there. We go into this building here, this here, and oh, that's actually where we're going to be staying. Jite Taphimi. I think he was staying in one of these buildings, but let's make sure that we're looking at the right part of the map. We are, yeah, we're looking at, it's actually, and I think that's because that's where I said to go when we were looking in Blender, so it shouldn't be a surprise. All right, so that marker is the center that we're going to use, and we'll go here to the map again, and we will take this location. I just want to make sure again that I'm, yeah, right at the edge of that. So right here, that's going to be the latlon that we're going to put into the script when we now go to the geolocation manager and we say the origin latitude, it'll be there, and the longitude will be there, and points of interest would be there. And so now when we play the game, let me save again. Now as we move about, we actually see that's the center of the world there. And there should be a marker somewhere down here, but I don't see it. Because that is where it belongs. And I don't see anything. Maybe it's underneath the landscape. It says it's created it. So it did make it, and it didn't show up. So I need to tell that to chat. Okay, so this seems to be more or less working. I moved my entrance point to be closer to the DAR over here, and that is where in our geo thing I had put the latitude and longitude. Now it's not coming in exactly precisely, and that may have to do with where this origin is here. But when I click play now and I move around, oh, yeah, it's clicking to put a point of interest, but that's not the one that it found, is it? Or maybe it did. I don't. That's odd. Okay, wait a minute. Let's try this again. Something weird is going on here. So I come in here and every time I click, I get a point. I didn't mean to do that. So stop it again. All right. So if I want to move around the world, did that come in or did I make that? That'd be interesting to know. All right, so let's try it again. In fact, I'll move the entrance point right over here, and I come in, and I start moving. It's a game that I'm making now.
Can I play it?
Not yet.
It's not right.
No.
Dad, can I play that game with those little footballs?
Yeah, we can do that. So it's not giving me a point of interest. However, it says that there is a point here, and it has a location. But maybe it's...
Right now. When I do the game with those little
Thing is, if I click, I'm going to move, and I don't want to do that. I want to...
I do the game where those little
Free aspect.
Right now.
Yeah, so somewhere in there was supposed to be a point that was added, and it has been added, and it may be too low, although I thought the script was going to fix for that. We do have the ability now to walk over to a spot, and then if we click on it, we can put a point of interest there, many points of interest actually, that don't persist, but it's still not placing the point. It may be, because now the script is telling this to take the original latitude, longitude, and then double it with the math, and then the world position it's supposed to float on and look down on this. It would be very interesting to know where, when we click on this, where it's placing the object that it now calls Riyadh. And if it says -126, I wonder if I can grab all of this, copy property path, or just copy, and then stop playing, and then let's see if I were to take my point of interest and move it there, so paste, then where did it end up? It ended up down there, so it's nowhere near where it's supposed to be. So that's interesting, because that is what it said when we were there.
Milk, please.
And
I want to drink milk.
Want to drink milk? And also when we click
and
here,
I open the cap of it. But Daddy, look! I open the cap of it this.
So it's asking me to modify my script, and I'm going to add using the user interface for Unity Engine. Let's see. All right. Then the next advice it gives me is to add these new fields. So public and private, header, POI, user input. I'm not really sure where that goes. Suppose I can put it in here, and then I'll see if I get an error message. So that's the points of interest UI input, and then it has an input panel it wants. And then update the update function like this, the void update. So where's my update? There it is, void update, and we're going to change this update function down to, I guess, there. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and I guess all of it. So that's the void update that we're updating. All right, and then it says to, in start or awake, add this. So where's start? I don't see start. Where's start? In start or awake, add. So within the start function, in start. So I'll put that in there. I hope that worked. And then add this new function. And we'll add that new function on, where would that go? Before the update, maybe? So it'll be like that. And when you click on the terrain, the UI pops up. Drag these in. Create the UI panel. So I also have to go hierarchy, UI canvas, and add an input field. So we're going to go to in Unity. In Unity, get this thing to move over. There we go. Yeah, I need 2 screens really. In Unity, go to hierarchy, yes, UI, toolkit debugger, that's not what they mean, do they? Go to hierarchy, UI canvas, hierarchy, UI canvas. All right, did that. All right, give me a few minutes. All right, UI canvas, and then add an input field. How does one add an input field? An input field. What does that even mean? Add an input field. Field maybe? Or input field, there you go. Okay, add an input field. Got it. And then input field should be add an input field, and then what are we doing with that? Ooh, no, I didn't mean to do that. Add an input field, and I guess I could add a component to that. So TMP input field. So TMP, did we say input field? UI canvas and input field, TMP input field. So maybe I didn't do this right. So input field, let me take this out, remove component, add component, and go, oops, now what happened? I didn't mean to do that, did I? I want to do that now. Add component, input field, and then TMP. Maybe that's Text Mesh Pro input field. I think that's what it meant. And then button for confirm. So the main button for confirm must have a graphic target. Button for confirm. There's no button. Target graphic. So it wants a button for confirm. So just put a button in. Button. There's no button. No buttons. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'd have to get back to this. We are clearly at a point where we are able to get some markers in. There's a lot more code to be written, and we'll come back to that, but I think we're off to a good start with being able to use Unity in a GIS way. It just takes a little more understanding of where everything is in here and how to connect it all together. So the last thing I would do is if I test it, I think I'm going to get an error because we have scripts attached. Yep. So it doesn't like that, and doesn't like anything like that. I'm going to keep my scripts, but I'm going to have them taken out, and it should play, but of course the scripts will not function. It's just deleting the components because it really doesn't like those things. But fortunately, it's not deleting the actual scripts, it's just taking them out of where they were childed to things, and then when we test the scene, we'll get something here. So there's testing in the game, and then there's testing in spatial. It's limited what you can do in the game when you're using the spatial SDK, but that can be worked out. I like that there's at least some limited testing. And we'll see what can be done between these. We may have to abandon spatial for certain aspects of GIS. But up there on the top of there's our mosque, and there's the center of our world down there. So we haven't yet put a lot of stuff in, but we do have some things in there. That's the car, I guess, and that's the center of the world, and there's the marker up the hill there that you can see. So it's very promising. We're going to get to it, and thank you for following along so long.